Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm Michael.
And this is part 2 of our Best Of series.
Yes. And Blake, how does part 2 differentiate itself from part 1?
Well, this is more the movies that we actually are known for on this podcast. Talked about the old movies, our favorite old movies of the year. So these are the movies that we've watched for our first or second viewing of this year that are pre the 2000s, really honestly like the mid 2000s. We're kind of getting to the point where like those older movies are still they're starting to kind of become old. They're
getting gray hairs, back pain.
I mean, the 2000s or the year 2000 was 25 years ago, right?
Haha, fuck off.
It's wild. It's really wild. Quarter century. So I would say, honestly, if you had a movie from the early mid 2000s in here, I would not have a problem with that by any means, because I have one of those.
I like that you're telling me this now after I've already made my list.
I'm pretty sure I told you that while we were making the list, but like always, you're not always the best at paying close attention to instructions.
What? But God, I'm charming.
Yeah. But yeah, no, these are like the movies, obviously, that we're most focused on for the podcast. So this is kind of like our big episode, really. But we, you and I both kind of talked about, we already did like our new movies, our top 5 new movies of the year in the previous episode. And it felt like there was just a little bit more out there for us. Like my list was longer. It was harder to pick. Like I would say all of those movies are masterpiece films, and really recommend going and checking out our list from our new movies.
From last week, that's right. This episode, actually, it'll be coming out on what?
January 2nd.
So this is our first episode of the new
true.
year.
2025.
So happy New Year, everybody. I hope you didn't get too drunk. I know I did.
Maybe you're just hanging out in the bed listening to our podcast right now.
Yeah, maybe you're still recovering on the second.
I said that and then I thought about it and I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's okay. If I drank right now, if I drank today, serious, then I would be hungover for 2 days for sure. So
probably. Welcome to our 30s, everybody.
Yeah. The rules are we picked our old movies, top 5, only your first or second viewing of this year.
That's right. Important distinction.
Yeah, because, like we watched a lot of movies, and we kind of said this on the last episode, but like a lot of the movies we watched last year for the podcast were movies that you and I both really love.
Mm-hmm.
They're movies that we don't want to keep bringing up. They're movies, these are kind of like ones that we've found or discovered this year for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
That being said, you did the top 5 first you started with the new movies.
I did start. I am a starter.
So I think I'll start this time.
I'll allow it.
Cool. My number 5 is a movie that I'm a little bit mixed on to this day. Although it's been a movie that I've been thinking about since I watched it, and I actually watched it twice this year.
Okay.
It's from 1975. It's actually one of 3 movies from the 70s on my list, which, maybe Tarantino's got a point that 70s movies are great.
Yeah, well.
It's Death Race 2000.
Okay.
It's a movie that I've brought up with you, and I think we briefly mentioned it on the podcast before in previous episodes. It's the original Death Race film, shot in the 70s on an absolute no-budget, shoestring budget. Like,
wasn't Stallone in it?
Sylvester Stallone, Sly Stallone, makes a very early in his career appearance in this movie as a side character.
Nice.
Machine Gun Joe is his name, I believe.
Wow.
And he is one of the racers. So this is a dystopian, campy American film where a bunch of racers in this fascist America are charged with providing entertainment to the masses by racing across America, racking up as many deaths as possible on their way there, being televised for all of it. And the rules are kind of unclear, honestly. I don't know if you get separate points for getting there first and also separate points for killing the most people on your way. And certain people, like old people, there are more points for killing and stuff like that. So it is a very typical dystopian film. So why is this movie on my top 5?
I don't know, Blake. Why is this movie on your top 5?
Like I said, this isn't the best movie of my list, and that's why it's in the number 5 slot. I don't think this movie has the best score, definitely not the best acting, or really the best shot action I've ever seen. But what this movie does really effectively, and we don't get movies like this anymore, is this is really an ideas film at the end of the day. The core of this movie is, and a lot of the 70s movies are like,
so it's like
high
a movie
concept.
It's a movie that's sold on its premise, maybe?
Exactly. So this is a movie that is really well written and it's really well thought out. It's about, fascism in a modern day America. Like, this is kind of a dystopian, like, this is in the future. It takes place in the year 2000. Back in the 70s, they were thinking 25 years in advance what the world might look like, given America's trajectory at that time. It's really, really interesting to see the perspective on this. And I've been thinking a lot about this one this year because I've been trying to wrap my head around all of the ideas in this movie. I actually would say that, you couldn't make a movie like this today. And that's why it ended up on my list, is because it's so special and it's such a time capsule of a period in which you had a little bit more freedom in your art to, like, say things that were
you could
more
say things about other things.
Yeah. Like, this is a really thought-provoking movie. Like, I actually saw an argument online. I think it was Patrick H. Willems put this argument out there that really movies have become like the activism for us. Like, they've become activism for us and they protest for us now. Like, the corporations are like, here, we're going to give you this movie where these characters are fighting against the man and you get to sit there and, like,
you get to feel good about yourself for no reason.
Yeah. You get to feel good about yourself. And, like, at the end of the day, like, the term that I've coined for it is fast food activism.
Ouch.
That's what we have now.
That's depressing.
I think that you just, like, literally cannot make this movie anymore. And I ended up writing, because this movie was so thought-provoking to me, like a 1,000-word essay on it, which I showed you.
I remember that essay. Yeah.
And I still haven't posted it online at all because, I'm still, like, kind of battling all my feelings about this movie. And again, that's why it's
I battle my feelings with alcohol. Sorry, go on.
It's funny because this movie has actually had several remakes and sequels. Like, the most notable one is 2008. Jason Statham put out a movie, a death race movie.
And that's right.
Yeah, we were kids and we watched that movie. And, like, it's a fine action movie. But the thing is, and again, this is kind of going back to what I was saying about movies not being made like they used to, is a movie like this in the 2000s, they've just kind of cleaned out all of the activism part of this movie and kind of completely focused on a race part of this and, like, cool cars smashing against each other with guns, basically.
So it's basically like it's a zombie.
Yeah, it's like an action movie with nothing under the surface. Like, it's a popcorn flick. And that's not at all what this original movie is or is intended to be. And, like, obviously there's no budget here, so maybe there was some, creative liberties they had to do and, like, sacrifices they had to make.
And I'm sure maybe that's what it is. When there's not a lot of money on the line, you can afford to take risks.
Yeah.
Pun intended, question mark?
Yeah, and that's probably exactly it too, right? Is like if somebody in the executive room is like, I don't want you to print that because of how that might make us look or, like, the implications that might have on society as a whole, then you're at the liberty of who's paying you to make the movies, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
A lot of the perspective of the film is actually through the reality show aspect of it. Like, this is kind of ahead of its time in the reality show. Like, there's TV announcers who are kind of like one of the characters' names, I love this. Her name is Grace Pander. And their job is to just sell this propaganda to America.
Wow.
Don't look at, like, the hand over here, like, keeping everything under control. Like, let's watch this mindless violence kind of together and enjoy this.
Wow, yeah.
It is a really fascinating movie that is extraordinarily imperfect, but just the most thought-provoking movie, I think, on my entire list. Even, like, more so than last week's The Substance.
Interesting. Okay, I might have to check it out then.
Yeah, I would love to see this remade and
do you think
updated.
Are we gonna do it for the podcast at some point?
I think we have to.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating and, like, it's always, especially now, it feels like hyper relevant. Like, that's why I kind of almost am worried about posting my thoughts on the movie in full because of, like,
because you have opinions.
Because I have opinions about it.
Yeah, we don't share our opinions.
Well, and I don't think America contemporary times is used to having, thoughts and opinions. Like, either you shut up and be violent, or you violence is bestowed upon you, and you are shut up.
Okay.
So, I don't know. This is a movie that, like I said, it very much thought-provoked me, and it's a movie that...
It wrinkled your brain a bit?
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of people out there who would really connect with something like this, especially in our modern climate.
Well, shit, Blake. I might have to go home and watch it. Add it to the list. The
Yeah.
never-ending list.
And the beauty part of this movie is free on Tubi right now, and a lot of the movies that I'm talking about today on my top 5 list are also on Tubi. So
Free on Tubi. So again, this is the sponsored by Tubi section of the
yeah,
podcast.
pretty much. So, and it's like an hour and 20 minutes. This is a very short movie, so it's even despite all the flaws and everything, I think it's worth your time.
Okay, tight. I would definitely watch it just for young Stallone. You ready for my number 5?
See,
It might shock you. It might not. My number 5 is a cut above, and that is Edward Scissorhands.
oh really?
Really?
That's great.
So we just did Edward Scissorhands, and you know what? I didn't think I liked it as much as you did.
Yeah,
But it's been, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
yeah, we're closing on 3 weeks. Yeah,
3 weeks? I think about it every day.
really?
Yeah. And I
Wow.
actually just realized last night, I was visiting some family, and I was like, I'm thinking about this movie again. And I was like, it must have done something
Yeah,
if I can't seem to get it out of my head.
Mhm.
And maybe that's my own personal interpretation of the movie. If you haven't seen the episode, I argue that the whole movie is like an allegory for the artist experience in contemporary culture. So, yeah, no, Edward Scissorhands is my number 5.
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I related to that young man with scissors for hands more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Tim Burton movie, and you and I in that episode talked about mixed opinions on Tim
Our
Burton.
feelings on Tim Burton.
Yeah, but it's early in his career, and he's got a little bit more restrictions, and things get a little less off the rails and crazy with CGI and stuff like that. And like, it,
You know, people give George Lucas a hard time for his CGI, but like really, Tim Burton took to CGI
Ooh.
like a fish to a thresher.
yeah, like a big fish to a thresher. See what I did there?
Kind of. Yeah, a little.
Although I love big fish, so
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, no, I didn't think I liked it that much, but it turns out I was wrong. I liked it a lot more.
yeah, I think that ended up on my best my long list, my honorable mentions as well. So I was surprised at how much I liked it too. I was hesitant when I selected
actually,
it.
it makes me a little more interested in Tim Burton's early work. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of want to go back and watch Batman. I kind of want to go see Ed Wood or
Mhm.
even Mars Attacks or stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So good job, Tom Burton. You did it.
So my number 4 is a movie that we talked about really early actually this year, and it was a movie that Jason and I did on the podcast the first part of the year. I don't think it's a perfect movie, but it's one of the most fun times that I had at the movies this year. It's a movie from 1988 called Bloodsport.
Ah,
Yes. You know, a little bit of background. Like, I'm a fan of MMA. I watch UFC. Like,
you sure do.
I enjoy like that kind of the boxing and like the mono like 1v1 kind of type of sports.
Do you want to one me? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, this is the movie that really brought MMA fighting to the mainstream. Like, this is really what got the ball rolling for something like the UFC to become more popular and more mainstream. And it's also one of Jean-Claude Van Damme's first movies. So it's a mixed martial arts film starring him. He's an army captain. It's actually based loosely on a true story, but like pretty much all
I
of
looked
it,
into it. It's complicated.
yeah,
It's really complicated.
loosely is almost putting it loosely.
Yeah.
But so Jean-Claude Van Damme playing a character who's an army captain. Yeah, so he's trained in like this old form of ninjutsu by the sensei that he grew up with. And there's a whole bunch of flashbacks in the early scenes about how he came to meet this guy. And so he's actually leaves the army temporarily to go fight in this underground fight tournament in Hong Kong. And let me tell you, this is my favorite film location of 2024 that I saw. Old school Hong Kong, filming in like the shady areas of Hong Kong is really cool scenery. Like, it's getting just chewed up at all points and whenever possible. Fantastic choice of movie
So
location.
it's an 80s movies.
Yes.
Nobody does cheese better than the 80s.
Yeah, and
Cheese and cocaine. That was the 80s.
you just described this movie perfectly. Like, it's not high art, but god damn it, this movie is fun. Like, I had a rip-roaring time with this one.
Blake, Deadpool and Wolverine was on my top, like right dead center of my top 5. You think, you're preaching to the converted here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a movie that I laughed ridiculously hard at. Like, it's so insane. Like, the performances are crazy and out there, and some of them aren't even good, but they're fun.
Yeah.
if you like the montages in Rocky movies, this movie is basically one long fight montage.
Okay, you know what? You might have sold me on this movie.
It's great. I really like this one a lot. I was excited. I was kind of immediately, when I finished this movie, I was like, I could rewatch that right now. Like, I had so much fun with it. And you know, again, it's not asking you to think a whole lot. It's just kind of asking you to sit back, relax, and have a good time. And sometimes that's all you need in the
I could do
movies.
that.
Yeah. Like, I really, really do recommend this one a lot. Like, it's a cult classic, and there's a reason for that. And, like, I, generally speaking, often gravitate towards the cult classics. Like, I understand, I get why people can get behind a movie like this and become champions of a film like this, because it's just so much fun. Like, and at the end of the day, that's what a movie is supposed to be, right? Like, it can drive a message like Death Race did, and it can, like, be inspirational. It can make you question your mentality on the world, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, don't we all just want to be entertained?
Don't we all just want to see Jean-Claude Van Damme do the splits?
And
I do.
The other part of this too is like I said, you should go back and listen to our primer episode of this. But the movie I wasn't sure of in the first 10 minutes, and after that I was like, this is so good. I'm having so much fun. Just watch a couple of the movie clips on YouTube. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Okay, deal.
And that one's another one streaming on Tubi. So there's really easy access to it. So again, cannot recommend how fun of a movie this is.
Okay,
and that's my number 4.
So my number 4 is a movie we did back in February starring Bill the Hurricane Murray.
Oh,
Groundhog
no way.
Day.
This qualifies.
It's my second time watching it.
Really?
And you know what? I'm surprised it wasn't higher on my list because I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yes.
You know, it's the classic setup. It's Bill Murray stars the world's crankiest weatherman. And he finds himself reliving the same day over and over and over again. And you know what? Actually, I forgot to mention this last week. Palm Springs was an honorable mention for my top 5 list.
That would be in my top 10 of the 2020s, I believe.
It's really good.
Very good.
And you know what? The whole idea of a time loop has sort of become a sort of cottage industry lately, but this is the one that started it.
Yes.
And you know what? It holds up.
Very
if you can make me laugh at a unaliving montage, I think you're doing something right. Yeah. And like the fact that this movie got made at all and is as good as it was is kind of shocking and preposterous. You know what I mean?
Right. It's one of those.
Yeah. Like it's so good. I mean, I think as great as Bill Murray is, I think Harold Ramis and the screenwriter.
Harold Ramis. No, it's not. It's I know who you're talking about.
You know, for as much credit as Bill Murray deserves, the real unsung hero of this is Harold Ramis and the screenwriter whose name I forget. Like they really elevated this concept. You know what I mean? It's got to be like one of the greatest movies of all time. Yeah. It has to be. It's probably Bill Murray's best performance too. Yeah,
and I think that this is the one that he was able to use to pivot into more serious roles, right?
Yeah, really.
And people started to actually take him seriously as an actor, which is something that he really wanted, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's great. And again, like movies like Palm Springs or Happy Death Day
or Edge of Tomorrow,
they have all taken the time loop concept and like gone in their own directions with it. But like this is often imitated but never duplicated. You know what I mean? This is the OG. It's great. And it's shockingly heartwarming too.
Yes. It's funny for a Bill Murray like performance, right?
It is funny how Bill Murray is like is apparently such an asshole in real life and plays such an asshole so well, but like he can channel this warm-heartedness when he needs to. You
know what's really cool about this movie as well is connected with The Substance, a movie that I talked about last week on our top 5 through Margaret Qualley and Andy McDowell.
Oh.
Mother-daughter.
Oh.
Yeah.
I see it now. I do see it now.
There you go. You got there.
Cool. Also, one thing I didn't find out until afterwards, but I found out recently is Starfire and Princess Bubblegum's voice actors in this movie. Do you remember the young couple that Bill Murray convinces not to get divorced?
Yeah.
That I forget her name, like Hayden Wallich or something. She that's the voice of Princess Bubblegum in Starfire.
Cool.
The more you know.
We talked about Michael Shannon being in there.
Yeah, so like Michael Shannon's wife.
Huh,
that's Princess Bubblegum. Yeah.
That's great. My number 3. This is a movie, again, that I watched with Jason early this year. It's a movie that's been on my list, like, since as long as I've even had a movie list to watch. And its reputation is considered one of the greatest of all time. A little bit tarnished by the director's reputation, unfortunately.
Uh-oh.
It's another movie from 1974. It's actually one of two movies from 1974 on my top list. It is Chinatown.
Uh-oh.
Yes, and we can all acknowledge the issue with the director not being the greatest dude.
I found this YouTube channel where they do like biographies of like famous writers.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've started to notice is that all famous writers throughout history were dicks. Something about terrible people. Sometimes they make great art.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate, but anyway, this is a masterpiece. Like, this is considered one of the greats of all time. It's one of Jack Nicholson's best performances. I would argue maybe his best performance as Jake Gittes. This is the neo-noir mystery film that is very slowly paced, but it's about, and it sounds not even interesting, about the murder of a rich man in LA and the 1930s, and it's kind of set during like LA's expansion. It's inspired by the California water wars. Like,
yeah,
this is all, it's all like land rights. Like, this is like, municipal.
This shouldn't be interesting, but somehow it is.
But somehow it is, because it's almost elevated, right? And again, this kind of goes back to me talking about movies that could not be made today. And I kind of think that this is another one of those movies that I don't think could quite reach the same peak that it does. Like, this to me has one of the best endings of a movie ever.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Yes.
Yeah.
And until you actually watch this movie and understand just the emotional depth of that quote and just like the societal depth of that quote, like, you really don't understand fully like how great of a movie this is. Like, this movie is always going to be resonant. It's about unchecked wealth and greed and like, the monster of money, like the power and how money and power can corrupt a person to their very core, especially somebody who's lived in that world for so long. Like,
yeah,
to me, this movie almost feels like a Lovecraftian horror where by the end of the film, we just brush up against the true like horrors that are kind of behind all the smoke and mirrors. It's truly disgusting what we see just on even a surface level here.
There's something really fucked up that gets revealed later on in the movie, and when the offender is questioned, his explanation is it's such a chilling non-explanation.
Yeah.
I think you know what I'm talking about, but
really highly recommend this. Like, if you're a fan of mystery films, like if you're a fan of like, even just like Batman as like on the more like mystery side of things, like being a detective kind of thing, like this movie is completely through the eyes of Jake. Like, the whole film is literally around his perspective. We don't find anything out until Jake's found it out as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's something really special about that I really admire in the direction of the film. Unfortunately, Roman Polanski being the director of this film. But again, you got to separate the art from the artist sometimes. And there was a whole lot of other people. This is before all of the stuff came out about him, that you gotta appreciate all the other people involved in this one.
Yeah, right?
I really recommend this one, though.
Hey, Roman Polanski, if you're listening, go fuck yourself.
So yeah, this one's not really available right now in a whole lot of places.
Oh yeah?
So maybe a little surprising, but again, this is kind of something that is maybe highly present, talking about like the extraordinarily wealthy, the incomprehensible wealthy, and how they manipulate and dictate our lives. And so I could see why maybe this doesn't have a whole lot of shelf space right now.
What are you talking about, Blake? That sounds like something everyone wants in these super optimistic mid-2020s.
Yeah.
A decade where nothing ever went wrong.
Oh, man. Aren't you getting sick of living through interesting times?
No, because I am... because I'm an artist and I live in a cave.
True.
You're my anchor to reality.
For better or worse.
Yep.
So yeah, that's
better.
my number 3. Chinatown.
Exclusively better. Okay, my number 3. Another 70s movie, but probably the polar fucking opposite of Chinatown. And that is... Nice. It's Rocky.
Nice.
Rocky 1.
The OG, which I can't believe you've only seen once before this year.
Yeah, it's so weird because, like, I remember I was obsessed with the Rocky movies as a teenager, but for some reason, I only saw numero uno once.
Mm-hmm.
So watching it again with you this August, I was like, this movie's amazing.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the best viewing experiences I had this year too. Like I just got completely fucking sucked in.
Yep.
Very emotionally engaged. One of the best movies of all time.
Top 5 movie endings ever.
Oh yeah, are you kidding? And just like easily Sylvester Stallone's best performance.
Yes.
Like for better or for worse, this catapulted him into international superstardom, and he deserves it.
Even as a writer too, like Sly is a really, really good screenwriter.
Yeah, right. And like, there's a reason we love this guy 50 years later.
Yeah.
There's a reason. There's 6 Rocky movies, 3 Creed movies. There's a reason why this spawned a franchise, right? It's because there's something just so lovable about this guy.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, after watching Rocky 1 this year, like, Jess and I have now watched Rocky 2, which a big step down from Rocky 1, but I have been anticipating Rocky 3 for, like, literally the last 3 months.
Pity the fool, yeah.
Mr. T, the introduction of Mr. T, like, there's a lot of discourse online about how Rocky 3 is secretly maybe even the best Rocky movie, like, from
really?
Pure enjoyment perspective.
I think for me, like, I have such a soft spot for Rocky 4, despite or perhaps because of how cheesy it is.
It's more like it so leans into the 80s vibe, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the cool thing about the Rocky movies is they're kind of ever present and they kind of change with the times.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, like, changing the subject slightly, like, you enjoy Rocky more when you realize just the sheer rags to riches story of Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
This guy put everything on the line for this movie.
Yeah.
There's this great, like, featurette I saw where he talks about, like, stepping out of his trailer on the first day of shooting and realizing that, like, this was his one chance. And someone said, like, Sly, are you ready? And he's like, no, but Rocky is. And that was it, right?
Jeez.
Yeah.
Ugh. This was maybe one of my favorite revisits on the podcast this year.
I think that's what it was too. It was kind of like going back and being like, why do I not watch this every year?
Yeah.
This is fucking amazing.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah, and just, I forget who it was, but I watched an interview with young Sylvester Stallone, like right after the movie had come out, and like, before the plastic surgery. Cheap shot, sorry. But like, I remember talking to a friend of mine at my first job about how he thought Sylvester Stallone was just this dumb guy. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, he wrote all those movies. And like, I forget who it was. I wish I had looked into that before we started recording. But like, it's an interview with like a young 30-year-old Sylvester Stallone. And it's like, oh, he's smart. Like, he's a really intelligent guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and articulate as well.
Yeah. Very articulate. So anyways, yeah, Rocky. I mean, just the moment when he knocks Creed down for the first time, chills. The moment when he gets knocked down, Creed starts cheering, and then Rocky just crawls to his feet and continues the fight. Like, it's,
It's great.
It's
I fully support this on your list, and if it could have been on my list, it would have been on my list. But Rocky is a movie that there's just an itch that I have to scratch at least once every 5 years with this one.
Yeah.
I really, truly love this movie as well. Great pick. Number two. This is actually the second of 2 movies that we have not talked about on this podcast at all yet this year. This one's a little bit of a cheater movie. It came out in 2001, but this movie I did watch twice this year, almost back to back. Like, I watched it by myself one afternoon, Home Alone kind of thing, watched it, loved it. And I was like, Jess, we need to watch this like ASAP kind of thing. And we watched it together. She did not connect with it the same way I did, but that's kind of understandable because this is a movie about fathers, and obviously you and I aren't fathers, but like it's about fathers and sons and fathers and daughters and their relationship and like all of that sort of thing. And it's a movie that is portrayed in a way that is very unique, and it's almost hard to wrap your head around because it's the Royal Tenenbaums from 2001. It's a Wes Anderson film.
Oh, yeah, that one.
I think this is one of Wes Anderson's best films. I think that there's a lot of arguments online about The Grand Budapest Hotel being his best film. This is the movie that I finally have connected to Wes Anderson with. Like, this is the bridge movie for me because I've actually watched 3, 4, 5 of his movies already, and I've never really appreciated them the same way that I did the Royal Tenenbaums.
Okay, so this was your gateway drug.
This is it. This is the one where I was like, I get it. This is one of the best cast movies of all time, like absolute all-star cast from the late 90s and early 2000s. Gene Hackman, who maybe contemporary audiences aren't going to know because he's been retired for a long time.
Is he alive?
He is alive. He's in his like mid 90s.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, but the fact that he wasn't nominated for any awards for this is absolute crime.
Okay.
He plays the father.
A Lex Luthor level crime.
Yes, he plays the father, Royal Tenenbaum, and the movie is centered around this family, the Tenenbaums, who are a wealthy family. All of the children are child prodigies, and Royal is kind of a schmuck. He's a deadbeat father, and he becomes estranged with the kids over time, and there's this long, like, style and like the Wes Anderson trademark style in the prologue. There's a very long 25 minute prologue which is heavy narration by Alec Baldwin, actually, of all people. Very good narration as well.
Okay.
And it just like goes through like the kids growing up and like this rocky relationship they have with their father and how that impacts them and like and how they don't recognize how this impacts them in their lives and everything and how this father just doesn't care about them. And then so we get dropped off where the film really gets going is when everybody's become an adult. The father, Royal, has been kicked out of the home by their mom, and he's living in a hotel and he runs out of money. And he goes bankrupt, and he essentially tells the family that he's dying in order to move back into the home to live off of them again.
Wow. So not a winner.
Not a winner by any means.
Not Lex Luthor.
Yeah. So Gene Hackman, this is such a good performance, and like it's a really great dysfunctional family comedy. Like each of the kids, like you just feel for each of them in like their own broken way, and like how. You know, you see this as well, right? In like real life, like these kids who are just like absolute geniuses and they just can't handle it, or like life puts them down and they just get into like this existential spiral, right?
Are you talking about like gifted kid burnout?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that's a real thing. And so this movie is like shockingly like beautiful in a sense because you know, there's some really dark moments in this movie. Like, I'm talking really dark moments in this movie. But by the end, like, everything just kind of wraps up really beautifully. Like, this one is one that genuinely gets me a little bit emotional, like, even talking about this movie because of, like, how beautiful it is and how everything kind of resolves in one way or another kind of thing. I think that this is just genuinely like one of the best happy endings of a movie that I've seen this year.
So it does end happily.
Yeah, like in a sad happy note.
Bittersweet, you might say.
Yeah, I really, really recommend this one to anybody, especially people who maybe are on the fence about Wes Anderson. You've only watched his newer stuff where he really leans into his shtick, maybe even too much kind of thing. Like this is a little bit more restrained Wes Anderson. I think to get Wes Anderson, you have to go back to the early movies like this and appreciate them.
I prefer his early work.
Yeah, well, not even that. I really enjoy some of his newer movies, but I think coming back at them with a different perspective now that I've seen something like this, and like I said, I watched this one and I immediately went and watched Grand Budapest Hotel, and I was like, that was great. Like, "Don't touch my lobby boys," like one of like such a great quote. Like, there's so many good moments in that movie, and that movie is like a perfected film. Like there's something where it's just like this is peak, but for me like this movie is so much rawer and more emotional, and it just I don't know, I just really connected with this film a lot. I thought this was fantastic. I watched it, like I said, twice very quickly after seeing it because I was like, was that as good as I thought it was? And the answer was yes. Really, really love this movie.
Okay, tight.
It's available too in a lot of places. You can check it out on Disney Plus and Crave. So you've got options, which is great because this movie deserves your time.
Okay, tight.
Genuinely.
You might have sold me on that one too.
Yeah, good.
Shit. My number 2 is Gladiator.
I should have seen this coming.
Yeah, second time watching it. Liked it the first time, liked it even more the second time.
Yeah.
Haven't seen the sequel yet, might never see it. But holy shit, like I had a really good time. One of the best viewing experiences I've had all year.
There's something special about Gladiator in that I don't think you'll find anybody who dislikes that film.
Except Roger Ebert.
Except maybe Roger Ebert. But like, this is just a genuine crowd pleaser that you really can't say a whole lot negative about it. Like,
no, I mean, God, even, you know, even the lines and the dialogue, like, you know, if you should find yourself riding through green fields with the sun in your face, Do not fret, for you are in Elysium and you are already dead.
Yeah, everything is just so epic and grand, and like part of it kind of rests on Russell Crowe's like performance, right? Like this is a career performance.
Probably his best performance,
Yeah.
or at least his best known performance.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, the fact that this movie is as good as it is kind of a miracle when you look at like the troubled production.
This is
like,
the second or third time you said that in our top 10.
yeah, maybe
movies
that's
here.
part of what endears me to my favorite movies is just, you know, when
The
it's
sheer
like,
audacity of them.
the
being
audacity or the scrappiness behind it, right? Like, no, Gladiator, again, phenomenal work. Like, what can you say about it that we haven't already said? Like, you know, I actually rewatched the opening battle recently,
Nice.
just on YouTube, and I was like, this is as great as I remember it being.
Yep.
You know, like just
I think generally speaking, people forget about that first act.
yeah, I know, right? And like, you know, Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus, Russell Crowe as Maximus, Richard Harris as Marcus Aurelius, like
Yeah.
amazing.
It just hits on all levels.
It
I
hits on
agree.
all levels. Like, what more could you want?
For sure. No, that's a great second pick. Man, you got lucky. You got all the movies this year that you'd only seen once. I feel like I've missed that boat on a lot of movies.
You
know?
kind of, you know what, Blake?
Yeah.
There are perils to being an overachiever.
Sometimes that's for sure. So my number one is a horror movie. Actually, this is funny because I think this is now the third time in a year that my number one old movie of the year is actually a horror movie.
Wait. Before we do number one, should we do honorable mentions?
Sure. Yeah, we can
Okay.
do some honorable mentions. So my honorable mentions, honestly, I'm kind of gutted that this one didn't end up in my top 5, and that's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
I kind of loved it. Like,
Okay.
it's a beautiful film. Like, it's one of my favorite black and white movies of all time. It was only my second time watching it, I'm pretty sure. Genuinely, like, a really, really good movie. Gregory Peck is so good in this movie.
Yeah.
Absolute tour de force, like, performance. Like, he's so good in this film. And, you know, it's heartwarming, like, in a sense. And it's nostalgic. There's something nostalgic about your childhood and remembering, like, that time in your life kind of thing. And it was really special to me. So that one was tough. Raising Arizona was the next on my list. Like,
Okay.
if that name rings a bell and you've never seen that movie before, you should go and check out our podcast episode.
What's
about
the
that.
the yodeling? Like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really good.
Yeah.
You pretty much nailed it, and we haven't watched that movie in like a month and a half.
Yeah, I
so.
know, right?
Really, really good movie. Nicolas Cage is in an early performance.
Some of the best dialogue I've ever heard.
Yeah. Coen Brothers film. Like, yeah, go check out our primer episode on that one because it's great. The last one I'm going to talk about is Batman Mask the Phantasm as my honorable mention. Yeah. It was close. Like, literally all of these movies that I'm talking about were interchangeable in my top 5. I had to bring up Death Race.
You had to bring up Death Race.
So,
okay, fair.
Batman Mask the Phantasm, really great story. Maybe I think my second favorite Batman film.
Okay.
Really, really good stuff. Like, highly recommend it. Yes, it's animated. Get over it. It's 2024.
Get over it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, let's hear your honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions, yeah. One movie that I would have really liked to put on my top 5 that I didn't because I'd seen it more than twice is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Disney movie. Really, really good. Love it a lot. Had a great time watching it earlier this year. I thought about putting Texas Chainsaw Massacre in my top 5. I liked that quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
Didn't quite make the cut. The Talented Mr. Ripley was up there. That's
it was a surprise hit, eh?
Yeah, I liked that a lot more than I thought I would. So also, Threads.
Yes.
You showed me Threads, the British apocalypse movie. That actually just narrowly avoided the list. That's another one of those movies where you showed it to me and I was like, I don't know. But I like keep thinking about it. See, that's the thing. Sometimes you watch something and you're not immediately sold on it, but it lingers in your brain.
Yes.
Then there's other movies where like you watch them, you're like, oh, it's great. You have a really good time, and then you leave the theater and you never think about it again.
Definitely.
You know? Yeah.
Fair enough.
Those are my honorable mentions.
Cool. So shall we get to our number ones now?
Numero unos. Go for it.
So my number one is a horror movie. Again, it's funny that the last like few years, my number one old movie has been horror movies. So I don't know what that says about me as a person. I like horror movies, I guess. And there's something to be said about like some of these old horror movies and like they're just really reliable. They hold up, generally speaking, usually really well. Even if, they're a masterpiece and they're as iconic as maybe some of the ones I picked in the past are, even though they've been copied, they've never really hit the same highs that the originals did or understood the source material like the original ones did. So in this case, this is actually my second movie from 1974 specifically this year. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
This is a 5-star masterpiece of a film. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. This is as perfect to a horror movie as you can possibly get.
You know what? I knew you liked it. I didn't think you liked it as much as that.
I was completely blown away by this movie.
I was too. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
A low-budget horror movie from the 70s that it's mind-boggling 50 years later that this movie is still as effective. There's something like sick about how this movie is filmed, and I'm here for that.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
There's just the filmmaking style, and like you literally, it feels like you are sitting there with the main cast in every single shot of the movie.
Yeah.
It's genuinely upsetting. Like there's something so primal about how evil this family is, and this situation that the characters find themselves in with Leatherface and his family. And I gotta say, like, it's wild to me as well that a movie that's 50 years old this year, that is so iconic, that's so copied, still managed to have so many twists and turns and unexpected things happen in the plot to genuinely surprise and unnerve me. Like, I couldn't believe that in the first 10 minutes, there was a scene with a hitchhiker that was so scary that it's burned into my memory for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that hitchhiker scene and that the dinner scene, those ain't going anywhere.
No, like there are scenes from this movie that are going to live rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. Like that to me is absolute mark for how incredible the filmmaking is behind this one.
I agree. Again, that also very narrowly made my top 5.
I genuinely, like, if you are a fan of horror and you're like me and you were always kind of like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's a bunch of movies like that. Like, it's just another one of those movies. Like, it's another slasher franchise, whatever. No. You need to go back and check this one out.
Shut the fuck up and go watch this movie.
Holy crap. I honestly cannot recommend how sick this movie is and how well orchestrated everything about this movie. Every decision you can watch as decisions are made while filming this, and you're like, that's the scariest thing that they could have done right there.
Another movie that should have been a catastrophe.
Yes.
And I guess it was a catastrophe behind the scenes, but like true cinema.
True, like, auteur filmmaking.
Yeah, you got to give Tobe Hooper credit. That guy just went for it.
Yeah. So good. What's your number one?
My numero uno, my gold medal, my shower of piss is Raising Arizona.
Nah.
It was Raising Arizona.
Yep.
Might have been the best movie I saw all year, actually.
Wow.
Quite frankly, I loved this movie.
Yeah.
It really appealed to my sense of humor and my sensibilities. Me and the friend that I watched it with, we keep texting each other lines from the movie. Like,
that's great.
Yeah, it was so good. I've never respected Nicolas Cage more as an actor. Like, it's just so... And I mean, just the comedy in it and, like, that little prologue sequence at the beginning. Like,
the Coen brothers are masters. Genuinely speaking, one of the best filmmakers or duos out there. Like, they're my top 5 favorite filmmakers of all time.
The fact that we had a happy ending that's sort of ambiguous, but it's still a happy ending.
Yep.
Like, John Goodman and his brother, not John Goodman, their little their little duo, like all the screaming, the bounty hunter.
Yep.
Or my name ain't Nathan Arizona.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I know it's funny how, like, this movie ate some shit when it came out, but looking at it now, I'm like, it doesn't quite top The Big Lebowski, but it is really, it's close. It is so close.
Yeah. Again, I think this is like middle high on my Coen brothers list, but again, there's 3 Coen brothers movies that are in my top 100 movies of all time.
Yeah, no.
So that's tough, right? Like, and that says something about them as directors, that, like, I loved this movie and there's 3 other films that I'm like, those are some of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Absolute masters. Like, and you know, if you're a fan of The Big Lebowski, even like No Country for Old Men, like there's imagery from that film that's originated in this one.
Yeah, they really love the West, and they really love crime.
And convenience stores.
And convenience stores.
And convenience store workers.
Yeah, and just, I mean, the peak of this movie to me is like the chase scene in the middle that just goes on forever with the hoo-wee.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so good.
Yeah, like truly inspired.
I don't know if we even did this movie enough credit when we talked about it on the podcast.
I think I did. I think I was gushing over it. Yeah.
It's genuinely great. I'm glad that this one ended up on your list. I can't believe it's number 1, honestly.
Nah, it's funny. You know, I've talked before about how like my favorite works of fiction are serious but silly at the same time, and this movie really threads that line.
Yeah. And there's also something to say too about seeing like a movie like this with one of your good friends, right? Like,
yeah, that's
sharing this experience.
I don't know that I would have liked it as much if I'd just seen it by myself. I mean, I probably would have. I saw Sonic 3 by myself and I liked it. So yeah, no, Raising Arizonia.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that this one made it onto one of our lists, because this one was another tough cut for me.
Yeah, in the same way, I'm glad that Texas Chainsaw Massacre made it onto your list.
Yeah.
Right?
I love how you and I both appreciate our number ones, like each other's number ones.
Yeah, it's like, I respect that. Yeah. No, you did it.
Yeah. That's great. I can't believe this is over already. You know, our 2 top 5 lists.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a wild year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah. You've been doing this podcast for what, 3?
Yeah, just over 3 years now.
I've been doing it for just over 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next year is going to be fun. I just set up our list for next year, so we've got some big ideas on the horizons. Maybe we will get to an actual top 100 list instead of speculating on what's actually on our top 100
list. Wow,
list.
that'll take some time, won't it?
Yeah, that's why I've scheduled it for possibly the second half of next year.
That will probably take the whole second half of next year.
It'll probably I've schemed and I've thought, and yes. There's going to be movies we're going to have to talk quickly through.
Yeah. You heard it here. We'd almost have like a timer set where it's like you get 1 minute, go.
pretty much, especially like 100 through like 90. You get to say the title.
Right. I don't even know that I could list 100.
Well, you're gonna have to.
I guess I'm gonna have to. Shit.
Well, you've got a solid base. We're at probably on this podcast, I would guess we're 70 movies deep now.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, plus, you know, we've got our movie drafts and everything else that we've done. Like, we talked about quite a few movies. Not like cinema speculation number of movies, Quentin Tarantino's book.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, we're getting up there.
We're putting in the numbers.
Yeah, and I finally this year started tracking our movies that we've been doing on Letterboxd and actually writing comments and like tracking all of the movies I've been watching and actually starting to link some of our reviews and our discussions to the movies we've watched onto there too. So
is that bringing in numbers?
I don't know about that necessarily, but
okay.
It's fun anyway. You connect. You know, I've gotten to read some great reviews from like Patrick H. Willems, and
he's so great. We're always talking about how great Patrick H. Willems is on this podcast.
Just an actual gem.
Yeah, cool guy.
Yeah. Who else I've been following? Mike Flanagan, watching his reviews of things. You know, one of the great horror TV directors.
The Stephen King adapter.
Yeah. And there's some other really like famous people on there and I love, you know, finding other people's perspectives. Like there's some really great other reviewers on there that have some really interesting opinions and like definitely don't agree with everybody, but that's kind of part of the fun of being on Letterboxd with everyone is you kind of get to read some like crazy out there opinions.
Wild shit. Yeah.
I think next year's going to be a lot of fun. We got a pretty stacked list, I think, coming up next year. And we're also 25 years going to be talking about a movie from the year 2000 to start us off with too, which we kind of already broke that seal with Gladiator, but it was worth it. You know, it was time.
Seals are made to be broken.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe we'll watch some movies that you know are getting some weird legacy sequels, getting weird out in the world.
Oh God, legacy sequels.
Yeah, so
actually, they're not all bad.
Yeah, they can be hit or miss, right? Like, I mean, Blade Runner 2049, one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah.
Just depends on what they decide to do with them, right?
Yep.
At the end of the day, we're all here to make some money.
We are.
And be entertained.
Yeah.
In that order.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
And
I hope you have finally recovered from your New Year's Eve hangover. Yes, Blake.
On January 2nd, probably in the evening, I've finished work for the day. The podcast is ready to go. You've sent me the episode description. we're all feeling good, and bloop, there it is in all its glory.
Bloop, there it is. Bloop, there it is. Happy
All right.
2025, everybody.
Yeah, as always, tell your father and your mother and your sister and everybody else in your life.
Is that the 2025 new rule? Tell everybody?
Tell everybody.
Tell everybody, not just your dad.
Yeah, but tell your dad.
Yeah, him too. You guys should talk more.
All right, see you next time.
Bye.